Good morning. We're here, episode 54, reading about 10 minutes a day from Michael Malice's The Anarchist Handbook. And we are reading in chapter 15, Voltairine to Cleyre, from Anarchism and American Traditions, 1909. And we'll just jump right back in with reading about halfway down on page 209. Here we go, episode 54. Quote, confidence, said the revolutionists who adopted the Kentucky resolutions, quote, is everywhere, the parent of despotism. Free government is founded in jealousy, not in confidence. It is jealousy, not confidence, which prescribes limited constitutions to bind down those whom we are obliged to trust with power. Our Constitution has accordingly fixed the limits to which, and no further, our confidence may go. In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. End quote. These resolutions were especially applied to the passage of the Alien Laws by the monarchist party during John Adams' administration, and were an indignant call from the state of Kentucky to repudiate the right of the general government to assume undelegated powers. For, said they, to accept these laws would be, quote, to be bound by laws made not with our consent, but by others against our consent, that is, to surrender the form of government we have chosen, and to live under one deriving its powers from its own will, and not from our authority, end quote. Resolutions identical in spirit were also passed by Virginia the following month. In those days, the states still considered themselves supreme, the general government subordinate. To inculcate this proud spirit of the supremacy of the people over their governors was to be the purpose of public education. Pick up today any common school history and see how much of this spirit you will find therein. On the contrary, from cover to cover, you will find nothing but the cheapest sort of patriotism, the inculcation of the most unquestioning acquiescence in the deeds of government, a lullaby of rest, security, confidence, the doctrine that law can do no wrong, a te deum in praise of the continuous encroachments of the powers of the general government upon the reserved rights of the states. Shameless falsification of all acts of rebellion to put the government in the right and the rebels in the wrong. Pyrotechnic glorifications of union, power, and force, and a complete ignoring of the essential liberties to maintain which was the purpose of the revolutionists. The anti-anarchist law of post-McKinley passage, a much worse law than the Alien Sedition Acts, which roused the wrath of Kentucky and Virginia to the point of threatened rebellion, is exalted as a wise provision of our in capital, all-seeing Father in Washington. Sorry about the verbal cluster there. Such is the spirit of government-provided schools. Ask any child what he knows about Shays' Rebellion, and he will answer, quote, oh, some of the farmers couldn't pay their taxes, and Shays led a rebellion against the courthouse at Worcester so they could burn up the deeds, and when Washington heard of it, he sent over an army quick and taught him a good lesson. Quote, and what was the result of it? The result? Why, the result was, oh yes, I remember. The result was they saw the need of a strong federal government to collect the taxes and pay the debts. Ask if he knows what was said on the other side of the story. Ask if he knows that the men who had given their goods and their health and their strength for the freeing of the country now found themselves cast into prison for debt, sick, disabled, and poor, facing a new tyranny for the old. That their demand was that the land should become the free communal possession of those who wished to work it, not subject to tribute, and the child will answer, no. Ask him if he ever read Jefferson's letter to Madison about it, in which he says, quote, societies exist under three forms, sufficiently distinguishable. Without government, as among our Indians, under government, wherein the will of everyone has a just influence, as in the case in England in a slight degree, and in our states in a great one, under government of force, as is the case in all other monarchies and in most of the other republics. To have an idea of the curse of existence in these last, they may be seen. It is a government of wolves over sheep. It is a problem not clear in my mind that the first condition is not the best, but I believe it to be inconsistent with any great degree of population. The second state has a great deal of good in it. It has its evils too, the principal of which is the turbulence to which it is subject. But even this evil is productive of good. It prevents the degeneracy of government and nourishes a general attention to public affairs. I hold that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing. Or to another correspondent, and I believe again this was Jefferson writing still, quote, "God forbid that we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. What country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that the people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take up arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Ask any schoolchild if he was ever taught that the author of the Declaration of Independence, one of the great founders of the common school, said these things, and he will look at you with open mouth and unbelieving eyes. Ask him if he ever heard that the man who sounded the bugle note in the darkest hour of the crisis, who roused the courage of the soldiers when Washington saw only mutiny and despair ahead, ask him if he knows that this man also wrote, quote, "Government at best is a necessary evil, at worst an intolerable one." And if he is a little better informed than the average, he will answer, quote, "Oh well, he, Tom Paine, was an infidel." Catechize him about the merits of the Constitution, which he has learned to repeat like a poll parrot, and you will find his chief conception is not of the powers withheld from Congress, but of the powers granted. Such are the fruits of government schools. We, the anarchists, point to them and say, if the believers in liberty wish the principles of liberty taught, let them never entrust that instruction to that. I'm going to start that over. Such are the fruits of government schools. We, the anarchists, point to them and say, if the believers in liberty wish the principles of liberty taught, let them never entrust that instruction to any government. For the nature of government is to become a thing apart, an institution existing for its own sake, preying upon the people and teaching whatever will tend to keep it secure in its seat. As the fathers said of the governments of Europe, so say we of this government also after a century and a quarter of independence. Quote, "The blood of the people has become its inheritance, and those who fatten on it will not relinquish it easily." Public education having to do with the intellect and spirit of a people is probably the most subtle and far-reaching engine for molding the course of a nation. But commerce, dealing as it does with material things and producing immediate effects, was the force that bore down soonest upon the paper barriers of constitutional restriction and shaped the government to its requirements. Here, indeed, we arrive at the point where we, looking over the 125 years of independence, can see that the simple government conceived by the revolutionary Republicans was a foredoomed failure. It was so because of the essence of government itself, the essence of human nature, the essence of commerce and manufacture. Of the essence of government, I have already said it is a thing apart, developing its own interests at the expense of what opposes it. All attempts to make it anything else fail. In this, anarchists agree with the traditional enemies of the revolution, the monarchists, federalists, strong government believers, the Roosevelts of today, the Jays, Marshalls, and Hamiltons of then, that Hamilton, who, as Secretary of the Treasury, devised a financial system of which we are the unlucky heritors, and whose subjects were twofold: to puzzle the people and make public finance obscure to those that paid for it, to serve as a machine for corrupting the legislatures. Quote, for he avowed the opinion that man could be governed by two motives only, force or interest. Force being then out of the question, he laid hold of interest, the greed of the legislators to set going an association of persons having an entirely separate welfare from the welfare of their electors, bound together by mutual corruption and mutual desire for plunder. The anarchist agrees that Hamilton was logical and understood the core of government. The difference is that while strong governmentalists believe this is necessary and desirable, we choose the opposite conclusion: no government whatsoever. And with that, we will wrap up the episode today toward the top of page 213 and get back to you tomorrow for the next episode, reading about 10 minutes a day from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice.